What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners, and welcome back to the next segment, I guess you could say, in this show where we're understanding injuries. We did one of these shows last week. A lot of people enjoyed it, and we really believe this is something that can take you, the fantasy owner, the team owner, to the next level, because there's not a whole lot of information out here from a fantasy perspective on how to handle players coming off of injuries. So in today's episode, we're talking about ACL tears, the dreaded ACL tear, and how should you handle it here in 2020? Maybe there's a few players on your draft board that tore their ACL in 2019. Should you target them or avoid them this year? That's what we're going to be talking about. So make sure you hit that like button and help us get this video shared out. We greatly appreciate it. So now let's head it over and head into Dr. Ethan Turner's segment of What's Up, Doc. All right, welcome back in, Dr. Ethan Turner, where we're going to continue our series on understanding injuries, right? This is kind of the next level up in understanding some fantasy football knowledge. And today, Ethan, we're talking about the dreaded ACL tears. Ready to talk about some knee ligaments?
Yeah, the ACL. It is probably the most, I would say this is the one that most people can recognize immediately. It is the reason that I got into talking about injuries in basically the NFL and in fantasy, because I was so tired of hearing ACL, 9 months, they'll be back, no problem. And that was it. That was the analysis that we got. And so I got sick of that. And that's why I'm here today, 3 years later, because I was so tired of just hearing that and thinking, gosh, there's so much more. There's so much more intricacy. There's so much more detail that you can get from these injuries. And there's so many different varying levels of an ACL that just weren't being discussed by mainstream.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's pretty cookie cutter for a long time. And I guess that kind of leads into the first question that I have is, are there different levels of ACL tears, or is it pretty straightforward all across the board? If one person tears it, they're all somewhat identical.
Yeah, so there's definitely different levels. The ACL can tear a variety of different ways. You can have a partial ACL tear in which part of the ACL is still attached. You can have an ACL combined with an LCL, an ACL, and an MCL, which is really common. You can have an ACL PCL injury. You can have a complete knee dislocation, which is all of them are basically torn. But we're just going to focus on the ACLs today. And for the most part, it's either once it's torn, partial or full, in an NFL athlete, they're going to get an ACL reconstruction. They're going to have a surgery to address it, because while if you or I were to tear an ACL, we might be able to get by with our normal lives without it. Or a partial tear, maybe we could get by without it. NFL athletes, they pretty much have to have a fully intact ACL.
Are you saying that we are not at the athletic ability, that level of an NFL athlete, Ethan?
Did I say we? I meant you. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I would say that we as a collective are definitely not.
We're not to that level. Okay,
balance,
we're on a different level.
Stretch of the imagination.
Awesome. Well, can you kind of like walk through what exactly, for those people who out there don't understand, what is an actual ACL tear? What actually happens inside the knee when you tear an ACL?
Yeah, so your ACL is one of the four major ligaments that I talked about. ACL is your anterior cruciate ligament, which means it sits on the front of the middle of your knee. And so your PCL is posterior on the backside behind the ACL. And then you have your MCL, which is on the medial side or the inside of your knee. And then you have your LCL, which is on the outside. So
there's not a test
just so we can clarify it, they're all knee ligaments. They all work to provide stability for the knee. The ACL primarily works on rotation. And I remember when I was in school, I always thought, man, the knee is so easy. It goes forward, it goes backwards. That's pretty much it. The problem with that is that it also rotates. And if you don't think that your knee rotates, what I'm talking about is basically the tibia or the shin bone on the bottom will actually turn a little bit. And that's the rotation that your ACL primarily prevents. As a secondary mechanism, it also helps prevent hyperextension of your knee, but that's not really its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is to make sure that, one, your tibia doesn't translate forward, and also that it doesn't rotate excessively. What we find is that with an ACL injury, the reason why I say that most people can figure out if it's an ACL is that it's the most common non-contact injury of the knee. And what that means is basically they don't have to get touched. They cut or they move. No one touches them. They crumple down and grab their knee, probably an ACL. What happens is the player will plant a foot and then try to cut or pivot or turn, which are these rotation movements. And basically the foot doesn't move with it. And so the bottom bone stays put, and then the top turns and rotates. And what that does is basically shears or cuts the ACL in half. It's the most common of the two. Sometimes you'll get your PCL too, but most likely it's that ACL that gets torn when that mechanism happens. It can also happen because of contact. So you can have a player get hit in the knee and tear their ACL. Usually it's from a hit to the side, so their foot's planted and then their knee caves in because somebody's hit them from the outside, caving it in. But those are kind of the two main ways that you tear an ACL, or that a player tears an ACL. It's pretty devastating. They know almost immediately. Textbook is that it pops and then it swells like almost instantly, like overnight. Your knee is going to be huge because it bleeds a lot. And so you get a lot of swelling in that area. So I always tell people, you'll wait for an MRI to diagnose an ACL, but they know almost immediately. When they go out onto the field, there are tests that I could teach you how to do that would tell you if you're diagnosing someone with an ACL tear. It's actually very easy to basically do a physical examination and know if they've torn an ACL, if you've done it a few times and you know what you're doing.
So what you're saying is, with just a few minutes of training, I too could be a doctor.
That is not true, but you could potentially know if someone's torn their ACL.
All right, well,
it really is a pretty quick test.
It's a small win, but I'll take it. All right, what about a few players? Now, we've seen a lot of players maybe come back from an ACL and do just fine. And then there's some other players that kind of linger off and on a little bit. One guy that comes to mind is Cooper Kupp. I mean, last year he came back super quick from a torn ACL and for the most part produced most of the year.
So with an ACL tear, you're looking at a few different things that contribute to, one, how fast a player can return, and two, how quickly they return to form or return to that pre-injury production. And so one thing that I look at is, I call it 12-month rule. So if you tear your ACL in the preseason, yeah, you're going to miss a year, but you're probably better off coming back the next year than you would be if, say, you tore your ACL in week 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, or Carson Wentz in 14. Those typically all players return in about 9 months, but you really want to hit that pre-injury production. You really want a full 12-month recovery if you can. What they've found is that when players return too quickly or try to rush a rehab from an ACL, they're much more likely to have a compensatory injury. I would say that Cooper Kupp, Adrian Peterson, those two were not what I would consider a standard recoveries. Adrian Peterson kind of reinvented how ACL tears were looked at from mainstream media, because they said, holy cow, he came back in 8.5 months and he produced, immediately. That is not a normal ACL recovery. And it's still not a normal ACL recovery. Cooper Kupp, same kind of thing. Mid-season ACL tear. Did not expect him to have the year that he had last season. But if you look back and you compare it to a guy like Will Fuller, there were some things that maybe we could have looked at that would have tipped us off that maybe Cooper Kupp was going to be a little bit better off. I, for one, said that I would take Cooper Kupp over Will Fuller in most leagues at their current prices, even though from a recovery timeline perspective, they were pretty similar. One of the reasons is that a lot of times what we'll see is that first year back, especially if they've rushed that rehab, you're going to deal with compensatory injuries, where basically a player hasn't had enough time to fully recover from the ACL, from the surgery, from the rehab that's involved with that. And so they have a muscle imbalance. They're much more likely to pop a hamstring. They're much more likely to pull a groin. And what we saw with Will Fuller was that exactly. He actually did both. He pulled his hamstring and then he strained his groin. So he was what I would consider more of what I would expect from a player that had a mid-season ACL tear returning. His 2019 looks a lot more like what most ACL tear recoveries look like when they tear it midway through the year. A guy that might be in a similar situation coming into this season that I know a lot of people were kind of high on and have high hopes for is Preston Williams. He tore his in week 7, and he's coming back. And you're looking at, could he potentially, and this year is kind of going to be a mess anyway with the COVID stuff, but could he potentially be at a higher risk for one of these compensatory injuries where basically he rushes back to try to make, he was undrafted. I mean, he does technically have to get back to the field as quickly as possible and try to prove himself to get what I would consider like life-changing money down the road. He has to get on the field as quickly as possible. There's a lot of pressure for him, but I worry. I don't think that this is the year that I'm necessarily buying a guy in Dynasty like Preston Williams, because I just don't think that he is going to show that potential he showed in those first 7 weeks this season because of the risk of those compensatory injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And another name from a couple of years ago, Dalvin Cook. I remember talking about Dalvin Cook last year, and he came back last year, actually 2 years ago, from his ACL, and I did a little bit of research. I didn't have you at the time. I didn't know who you were, Ethan. I was trying to do my own research.
Because I was around.
And things just got crazy. I was reading medical reports, and I was feeling smart, but I was just regurgitating what I was reading. And part of the thing that I saw is that when they reconstruct an ACL, they sometimes take it from the hamstring. And mid-season, Dalvin Cook started to have hamstring issues, and it could just be that he wasn't back to 100%, and it was really quick to label him injury-prone. And then we see last year that, when he had a full year recovery, he was pretty strong first half, majority of all of last year. So that's something else I think that we should look at here going forward, especially in 2020 for some of these guys coming off of ACL tears also.
Yeah, and if you had bought coming off that 2018 year for Dalvin Cook, instant value returned because his value was depressed because he was dealing with kind of the stigma of, hey, this is guy, we don't know if he can stay healthy, had the ACL tear, now he's dealing with hamstring. And if you don't realize that those two things can be related and it can all really be boiled down to the ACL tear, you can basically label a guy injury prone that maybe is not necessarily prone to injury. One guy that I'm still holding out one more year of hope on is Darius Geis. Similar situation from last year, down year, had a meniscus tear, which not always considered a compensatory injury, but he did have some issues prior to that. Had a delayed recovery, so he didn't even get the full 12 months. And so now I'm looking at this year as, okay, now's maybe a time to buy Darius Geis. He's still young. He is, he did not have an injury history coming into the league. And so, yeah, it sucks that we've had 2 years of, disappointing results. But if you're going to buy, now's the time to buy, because really it's not going to get much lower than what you're paying right now, especially in Dynasty, especially in redraft. And the potential is huge. I mean, just absolutely massive. We could be talking about 3 to 4 rounds ADP jump coming into next season, and you're paying bottom dollar price right now. So that's definitely one that I'm looking at and trying to get a hold of if I can. That's coming off a similar situation as what we had with Dalvin Cook.
All right, so injuries aside, let's do a quick little sidebar, some fantasy football sidebar, okay? So we're talking about Darius Geis.
Yeah.
And being a potential buy. Are you worried at all, though, that they'll have Adrian Peterson this year? They've drafted Antonio Gibson. Bryce Love is somebody who we've never seen before healthy in that backfield. Do you think that they have all these extra insurance policies just because they don't either believe in Geis or they're just never going to give him a full workload?
I would say I am concerned, but to me, the talent of Geis as a pure runner definitely intrigues me still. There's not very many guys that could potentially be 3-down workhorse backs in the league that you're going to get at the price you're getting Geis for right now. To me, it's kind of a no-lose situation because you're paying a discounted price for the injury, which is key. When you're buying players that are injured, you want somebody that you want to get a discount. You can play up the injury discount. And even if you are worried long-term that maybe this isn't the situation that you really want to be super involved in, all you need is one good game. You need one good game or 2 good games put together of guys healthy, and you can immediately flip him for value. And so for me, it's a no-lose situation because even though I personally believe in his talent, I can still flip him, even if I'm concerned. If I, say 2 games in, I notice something, I'm like, you know what, I'm not really sure on this. What I paid versus what I can get at that point is either the same, or I'm gonna come out ahead in some way, shape, or form. So to me, it's kind of a no lose situation. You're not really, the price I'm seeing people pay right now is minimal compared to the upside that he could have. I mean, he could potentially be a 3-down running back, and he was incredible at LSU. So I don't think we want to just discount him. And he was one of the youngest running back prospects in that class. So age is on the side too.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely plays a part.
You can't not be worried a little bit just because they are addressing it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, there could be a lot of mouths to feed in that backfield pretty soon if everybody can get healthy and get on the same page. But yeah, I love Darius Geis. I loved him come out of the draft. I just figured I'd throw a little sidebar in there, a little fantasy football talk.
I love Darius Geis. So you're preaching to the choir.
I mean, I have his autographed LSU jersey. How about that? I
do not.
Well, I have it.
I'm jealous.
Okay, well, that's okay. I'm offering it as a giveaway right now. It's part of our last video. They can go, leave a comment, hit the like button, and I'm giving away an autographed jersey on one of our earlier videos. Darius Geis it's on the list as a possibility. So kind of a good segue that we talked about him today. Good. You didn't even know that, Ethan. So
I knew that. I saw I pay attention.
Okay, I figured you did. All right, real quick. From a fantasy football perspective, kind of a little bit of a recap. If we have a player coming off of an ACL tear that just happened in 2019, i.e., we talked about Preston Williams. Is that somebody that, because it didn't happen a full 12 months ago, are you kind of just leaning on the fence of saying, you know what, that's just going to be somebody that I cross off altogether unless they've had that full 12-month recovery on draft day?
Yeah, I typically do. I typically just avoid drafting them just because I don't think you can trust them from week to week. I did have some Will Fuller last year because I was getting him in like the 11th or 12th round. And yeah, he came back and played okay, but he did win me 1 week. So I know that, the potential is there. With Williams, could he do that? Yes. But to me, the risk is that you draft a guy that isn't going to give you really a whole lot. You never know when he's going to start. You never know when he's going to blow up. Williams is a little bit different because he's pretty cheap still. Another guy that tore his ACL that I'm probably not going to get too many shares of is Rashad Penny, but his situation is a little bit different. He also had some cartilage damage, and he tore his LCL as well. So when you have multiple things going on, when it's not just one thing, the recovery timeline increases by a few months. So ACL combined with cartilage or LCL or MCL, you're looking at as opposed to 9 months, it usually takes 10 to 11 to 13. So at that point, you might not even get to see them on the field at all. And to me, that's like a total avoid. I'm not going to put any stock into that.
No, it's not worth it. Not worth it in my opinion either. Well, awesome. That's kind of the next installment of injuries, right? And we kind of hinted on some of these guys, and the reason for that is Ethan's got some injury breakdowns inside of our 2020 fantasy football draft guide where he says whether he will buy or sell some of these guys that we've mentioned here today. So if that's something you're interested in, head over to thefantasyheadliners.com. The draft guide is available right now. Go ahead and get your copy. $19.99, jam-packed full of fantasy football information. But me and Ethan are going to continue this series. If there's more injuries that you're looking at or you're kind of curious about, make sure you leave a comment down below. We're trying to make sure that you guys have all the information that you could possibly need heading in to a crazy 2020, because let's be honest, there's not a whole lot going on that we can watch on TV. So we're going to try to dissect as many details as we possibly can, right?
That's right. And I don't think we're going to do a video on COVID. So no. If you're sick of the COVID news, that is not included. Please don't suggest it. No COVID here, only football injuries.
No, we're over the Rona. I mean, we're looking past the Rona. We're trying to look forward to something a little bit more positive. But Ethan, I appreciate your time once again. And we're going to go ahead and get out of here for today. Like I said, greatly appreciate the support. Make sure you hit that like button and share this video out on your social media. We're trying to make sure that we get this awesome information out to as many people as possible, because let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of people talking about injuries right now, and this could be kind of that next step to put you over the top here in 2020. So we greatly appreciate your support. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week, a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.